I will never get over Breath of the Wild. It's exactly what the title says. Every year that passes, my love and nostalgia for this game just keeps on growing. Breath of the Wild was my first official Zelda game, and I would even argue that it was the game that really reignited my love for video games in general. And that was after a long break of ages 14 to 17. And all that time, I wasn't really playing any games. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, if it weren't for Breath of the Wild, I don't know if this channel would even exist. So to say that this is an important game to me is an understatement. Now, I know that there are some Breath of the Wild haters out there, and I think that mainly just has to do with like some people don't like the newer gen or more modern Zelda titles. They don't like the stories, they don't like the mechanics, whatever. And I think most of the time it's because they grew up on classics like A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, which is like the perfect Zelda game. And those are amazing games, by the way. I'm not saying they aren't. But I also think that each Zelda game has its own strengths and its own weaknesses, regardless of if it's an older title or a more modern title. I don't really love looking through the lens of, oh, this game is older, therefore it's better. But at the same time, everybody can have their preferences, like, no biggie. This video is also not supposed to be a bash on Tears of the Kingdom. I feel like I've made my thoughts clear on Tears of the Kingdom. If you'd like to know my thoughts and see my review slash critique, I actually have a video that I already made, so you can go watch that. No. This video is just an excuse for me to gush about one of my favorite games of all time. I've also noticed a shift lately in the Zelda-related content on YouTube. A lot of people are reminiscing about Breath of the Wild lately, I feel like. So I'm not the only one. Now, it could just be that the Switch 2 was just announced, and so everybody's reminiscing about the OG Switch's launch. And with the OG Switch and Breath of the Wild coming out in 2017, that means that Breath of the Wild and the original Switch are going to be 8 years old. But also, ever since Tears came out, I think that others, along with myself, have just found a new appreciation for Breath of the Wild. Because no matter how much you love Tears, even if you think Tears is technically the superior entry in this open world Zelda lineup, Breath of the Wild just hits different. But why? I recently watched this video. It's by The Renaissance on YouTube, and it's called Loneliness is a Critical Part of Video Games. But it's not loneliness in the depressing, negative sense. It's more in the wondrous, dreamlike, adventurous, I just started playing Minecraft for the first time sense. Basically, the video explained how some of the best, most popular games are able to encapsulate this feeling so well. Anyways, Breath of the Wild was brought up in that list, and it made me think, is that why I loved Breath of the Wild so much? Because I felt alone? But in the best way? I would say yeah, that's definitely part of it. I think a huge part of why I love Breath of the Wild so much personally is because of the point I was at in my life when I first experienced it. I was in my late teens, the age where I often felt alone and then sometimes actually wanted to just be alone. I had yet to face the stupid modern adult responsibilities. I was living at a relatively peaceful and simple pace from what I can remember. And I was finally starting to get out of that insecure and incredibly anxious phase of my adolescent years, and I was starting to become aware of my faith, who I was. At the time, I had also just gotten into anime, which I found I had an affinity for, and I was slowly rediscovering my love for video games at the same time. And I also didn't have this huge backlog of titles yet in the background mocking me. Just pretend they're there. I miss the simplicity. I miss when I just played the game at my own pace the way I wanted to. I was always excited to be done with classes or work or whatever I was doing at the time so that I could play more Breath of the Wild because I just couldn't get enough. Breath of the Wild, I think, represents that simplicity and also that almost subconscious turning point I was going through at that time in my life. But putting aside my own personal feelings for a second, what are the qualities that make Breath of the Wild hit different? Why does it feel like the best, lonely, surreal adventure you've ever been on? Let's go through the list, shall we? The post-apocalyptic world. As opposed to most Zelda games where Link is just kind of thrown into a world full of the bustle of everyday life of a million NPCs, Breath of the Wild immediately drops you into this abandoned, peaceful, sort of lonely landscape. A ton of the buildings and areas that you come across all across Hyrule are filled with crumbling structures and ruins, shells of the mechanical creatures known as the Guardians. Even the remaining Hylian towns that are still surviving are seemingly like super small and very tucked away from the more troubling areas like around the castle. Some of the NPCs still talk about the calamity almost like it happened recently, even though it happened like 100 years ago. I think that's like with the older characters and more for the sake of filling in the player what went on. And I guess this makes more sense, especially for the four main regions, as they are still all suffering from the effects of their designated divine beast. And the fact that they're all non-Hylian races, like the Zora, they all tend to live a lot longer, and so that whole calamity is still more fresh in their mind. But it's unique in the sense where you're thrown into this world where the worst battle has technically already happened. You're witnessing the settled aftermath and you're picking up the remnants for yourself. And this leads well into my next point, which is the amnesia and the stray memories. Say what you will about the amnesia trope, I know that it's not everybody's favorite trope and I think that it can be quite overused. But in this case, I think it really fits well with this whole theme. As far as I know, and I'm not an expert by any means, and I'm also excluding the first two Zelda games because they don't give much background on Link. This seems like it's the first game where Link is immediately left in the dark just as much as the player is. He has no former memories, no attachment or relationships to any of the current characters, no established role or home. He doesn't even know who Zelda is. Princess Zelda, the person the game is named after. He's never heard of her. And look, I know Link is supposed to be a pretty blank self-insert kind of character anyways, but in other games he still has a house, he still has maybe friends, sometimes family members, an overall role in society. But in Breath of the Wild, he doesn't know who the frick he is, and we don't either. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that instead of your protagonist already having base knowledge of the world and characters around him like usual, and, he's not being surprised by certain things, this time he is. Just as much as the player is. Because of the amnesia. Which I personally think that it makes it feel more surreal that you and Link are discovering things together. Also, the whole idea of collecting your forgotten memories as the main format for storytelling and discovering cutscenes, I think is super effective in Breath of the Wild. And it adds to that, I know I keep saying surreal, but it adds to the surreal, isolated adventure, as well as the mystery of what happened to Hyrule. I can't, and I must say this, I can't say the memory format translates the exact same way in Tears though. Here's a comment I found on my Tears of the Kingdom video that I think sums this up super well, and I wish I could reach out to this person and ask them to write everything for all my videos from now on, so you can just go ahead and read that. The memory format also succeeds in bringing this more melancholic, solemn mood to the adventure. All of the tragic occurrences have already taken place, and you're just remembering them now, like some 100-odd years later. And there's nothing you can do but sit back and watch. And unlike other titles, there's no time travel in this Zelda. So you're kind of stuck. These are also optional, completely missable, tucked away cutscenes. Sure, you can get hints from the pictures on the Sheikah slate and from the paint guy, the artist dude, but it's still up to you to seek all of them out. They're not just handed to you like most games and like 99% of their cutscenes are. Also, I'm not saying that this is the best, most original Zelda storyline either. I'm not going to pretend like it is. I'm also not going to say it was like executed perfectly just because I happen to love it. To this particular point, I'm essentially saying I appreciate the format that they implemented, and I think it goes along really well with the ambiance and atmosphere of Breath of the Wild. You know what else makes this game hit different? I don't know, maybe the music, the sound design, the minimal voice acting. Everything that's auditory about this game, really. First, the music. Minimalistic piano pieces that embrace the serenity, the stillness, and the simplicity of nature. The 3 S's. I am not going to be able to play a lot or even any of it because of copyright, but they also have extremely cozy, humble, inviting melodies unique to each village. Though I'm not trying to make this sound like a cozy game. There are definitely tracks in this game that are... So it's not all serenity and peaceful little piano tracks, but those are the ones that hit the hardest in those moments of exploration and discovery, you know? There's also the shrine music. Which is sort of eerie and ethereal. It creates this calm but mysterious atmosphere that I find personally to be ideal for solving those kinds of puzzles. Combine that with the smooth walls and the glowing lights and the echoey footsteps, which is a sound that I cannot get enough of, by the way, I don't know why. Yes, the sound design is amazing too. Whether it's the crackling of the campfire, the rain, the birds, and the rustle of the grass, everything has a lovely subtlety to it. It's just, okay. I really feel like I'm trying to sell this as a cozy game right now, so I guess for every point that I make, I'm gonna have to show a clip that proves the opposite, so. This is such a minor thing, but heck, this is what YouTube is here for. The voice acting, or rather the lack of it. You know how some games have voiced lines for every single NPC in their game? Nintendo has the money to do that, and yet they don't, and I appreciate it. I always love when you're able to read the text of most characters in their dialogue rather than just hearing them. This is really effective with horror games in my opinion, and when you're trying to build a tense, eerie atmosphere, and it helps with the more peaceful, cozy ones as well. Breath of the Wild also has the more minor NPCs exclaim and make all these goofy, silly noises for whatever reason, maybe to make up for their lack of voices, which I just love so much. Breath of the Wild certainly doesn't shy away from showing off its beautiful landscapes and scenery. I swear I never get tired of the lush forests, the flowing rivers, the gorgeous sunrises and sunsets, the ever-changing weather, and the different regions that are supposed to represent each season. I love that. I especially love the autumn-themed Akala. I wish I was there. Breath of the Wild's emphasis on nature not only aids in the serenity of the player's experience, but also the survival aspect. Nothing makes you feel quite as alone as sitting by a fire out in the woods, or trudging through a foggy, quiet winter landscape, or wandering through the old, crumbled ruins of past societies, the structures being overtaken by moss and vines. But then there's the desert. Exploration and discovery. The game lets you explore and discover things completely at your own pace. It also rewards you for looking in odd places and being brave enough to venture into the unknown. You know, the pitch black forest, the mazes, the chests, the materials, the ingredients, all the Koroks. And outside of the first introduction area, the Great Plateau, you're not forced down any particular path after that. You can go straight to the final boss if you want to, making it a popular choice for speedrunners. You can roam around the entire map and not complete a single shrine or dungeon if you don't want to. The game doesn't hold your hand or try to force you into a box. Looping back to the simplicity thing, Breath of the Wild at its core does feel simple, but I think Tears aids in this particular point of view a lot. Without Tears, I don't think anybody would be saying as much how they appreciate the simplicity of Breath of the Wild, because there weren't any other more modern Zelda entries to really compare it to. I think a lot of people, myself included, give Breath of the Wild this reputation of being simpler because its atmosphere and its setting is overall cleaner, it's quieter, the mechanics, though impressive, are not to the same scale as they are in Tears of the Kingdom, and mainly because Tears is just Breath of the Wild, but with a bunch of new stuff thrown on top of it and below it. Literally. So yeah, of course Breath of the Wild is going to feel simpler, because now we're going to be constantly comparing it to Tears, which is only natural. Some people are also of the opinion that Tears makes Breath of the Wild feel too empty, or even when not comparing it directly to Tears, some people have always complained about this, but I think the emptiness they refer to is completely intentional. I would go so far as to say it's what helps Breath of the Wild's atmosphere feel like, well, Breath of the Wild. Let's think about this for a second. Part of the development team's goal for Breath of the Wild was to make you feel like you were lost in the wild, immersed in nature. And nature in real life is a lot like how it's portrayed in Breath of the Wild. It's peaceful, still, empty most of the time. It gives you a sense of realism as opposed to having something in your face every turn you make, distracting you every chance it gets. Breath of the Wild gives you room to think, room to breathe, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of games nowadays reflect how concerned the developers are with the degrading attention spans of the general public, so they feel like they have to be constantly throwing stuff at you all the time, every chance they get. I like that Breath of the Wild doesn't do that, and the developers knew why they didn't have to do that. I'm not claiming that Breath of the Wild was the first open world game to really break the open world space, but let's just say it definitely shook up the genre. It opened the door of possibilities for all games going forward, not just open world games, because it proved to developers that people wanted that freedom, that flexibility, ambiguity even, integrated into every point of the game. The fighting mechanics, the puzzles, the exploration, the story, and the order of which any of these can take place. It was the lack of linearity in all these aspects that I think really cemented it. Because, like I said previously, Breath of the Wild really is just what you make it. Everyone is going to have a slightly different experience with their own playthrough. Some people are going to go fight Ganon in their underwear with a stick as soon as they get off the Great Plateau. Some people are going to acquire a huge collection of Lionel materials and not even touch the main story. Some people are going to complete all the side quests, all the shrines, defeat all 4 divine beasts, find every hidden chest, collect all the memories, collect all 900 Korok seeds, and then one-shot both phases of Ganon when they get bored or something. So yeah, I love Breath of the Wild. I don't think it's ever going to move drastically down the list for me. I think it's always going to be one of my favorite games ever. And I really owe so much to it, because like I said in the beginning, I don't know if I would have had my love for games rekindled the same way if I had not stumbled into this refreshing open world Zelda experience. And for me, I didn't personally start playing Breath of the Wild until 2020, which, holy frick, that was 5 years ago. Well, I'm just saying that it was 2020, maybe beginning of 2021 when I first finished it. And that's not that long ago when you think about it. And yet I still experience some serious emotional nostalgia for this game. It gets to the point where I gotta go look at Breath of the Wild art and screenshots on Pinterest in order to calm me down. Just kidding, but also, let me know what your experience with Breath of the Wild was like, how you relate to it. If you have anything to add that I didn't think of, I'm sure there's plenty. Most of the time with these videos, I end up finding people with such well-articulated comments that it makes me want to throw away the whole script and give my channel away to them. But I mean, I still love reading them, so if you'd like to support my channel, if you're new here, I recently opened up channel memberships, and I'll put a link in the description for those if you're interested. Thank you so much to everybody who has shown support already. It's so cute to see the little channel badges next to people's names down in the comments. It just makes me so happy. As always, thank you for watching, and go revisit Breath of the Wild. You won't regret it.